Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I'm going to touch on a point of a little bit of controversy. And again, we just have to be realistic about these things. You know, these topics come up, and I had someone in the comments ask me, is it really that bad for someone's health, okay, to, run a moderate but super physiological amount of testosterone? Like, what does the actual evidence say? And that's kind of the problem we run into. And I think, again, people are missing the point. When I've called out and predicted the health problems and deaths of a lot of these bodybuilders, it's not because they're running 500 milligrams of testosterone. And if I'm going to be quite frank, the evidence doesn't support the idea that that's particularly dangerous compared to the lifestyle of, say, the average American. It's not even in the ballpark. Okay, it's not even in the same category. And have I personally known people who've had health issues from things like that? No. And I want to be clear here. The people I have known in the whole bodybuilding gig, for example, which is not my scene, but I've had a lot of friends in it who had the same problems you see with these fitness personalities who died, is they use very large amounts. They oftentimes run a lot of tren, a lot of quin, a lot of orals, and then on top of it, they had other substance abuse problems. Okay, that's the combination. Now, people say, well, is that prevalent? Well, yeah, in that world it is. That's why you can predict those things. That's why you can see certain things coming with these people. Okay, it's because that's a big part of that world. People are under this assumption that that they're doing something very different than they are. These guys are way too big, way too shredded to be anywhere near what we're talking about in terms of, less than a gram of test a week, not running much other stuff with it. And they tend to have these other things going on. So you need to be aware of that. And I've known plenty of people who are in their 50s or 60s who've been on 200, 300, 400 milligrams for decades. Seem to be fine. Again, their quality of life is better than the general population. And I think that's what we're getting at. It's not they're not some health risk. But when you look at the studies on it and look at the actual evidence, that's the problem. Look at those studies that were done 20 years ago on healthy young men who they ran them at different doses, 300, 600 milligrams, etc., of testosterone cypionate a week. Okay, they found that things like their LDL did scale. The reduction in LDL did scale in a dose-dependent manner, and that the guys running 600 milligrams in the studies, like 16 and 20-week studies, what did they find? That their HDL cholesterol reduced by, I think, an average of like 19%. Okay, 19%. Some of them have slightly elevated hemoglobin. But that reduction, when you go look at it, it's like, okay, 19%, it sounds like a lot. But were they in the unhealthy range? Well, clearly not. When you look at the numbers in the study, what do you mean, an 8-point reduction? Okay. Is that significant? Yes. How does that compare with the average American lifestyle? Not even close. The people who are obese, eat at McDonald's all the time, things like that, their blood work looks dramatically worse on average. Okay? So are we saying no health risk? No. But here's what's been noted in other research too, when they looked at athletes who use stuff. The lifestyle itself of training and eating well and being fit seems to largely offset those risks. Does it completely negate them? And am I saying there is no negative risk at all? No. What I'm saying is that the sum total of current human research that we have, both in the lab and observational studies, are saying that someone who used moderate amounts of testosterone and possibly other anabolics, that if they are fit athletes, the health risks seem to be offset when compared to the general population. Now, Does that mean they might be even healthier had they not used anything? They might have been another little notch healthier, absolutely. And I don't think that's unreasonable to make that statement. But what we're finding is that even moderate users of anabolics, even when we go back and look through time and then when they're reaching their 60s and 70s, are still a little bit healthier if they were athletes. Make that clear, fit athletes. They're still slightly healthier than the general population in spite of having used. Now, obviously not necessarily because of it. So, you see where we're going with this? And I'm not downplaying it that there isn't some potential health negatives. I don't want to downplay that fact. But we live in a society where everyone is sick and dying. Being fit and doing what they're doing is still a healthier lifestyle than the average person. And that's the point being made. The sum total lifestyle. By that same token, we know that the healthiest alcohol amount to consume is 0. It's 0. Yet you will still have people say, well, if a person needs it for enjoyment, some alcohol in moderation is okay. If it improves their overall quality of life, and I'm very anti-alcohol, okay? And I'll concede that people who don't have addiction problems, okay, fine. If they need a little bit for their quality of life in moderation, the minor health negatives might be worth it for them, okay? Because they're minor. Doesn't mean 0. And again, we come over to the thing, what's the healthiest amount of alcohol to drink? 0. Does that mean that every person who has 2 or 3 drinks or 1 drink a week is going to die young from it? No. It's probably shaving very, very little off their life. We could argue, well, what about the quality of life? If they seem to get it from it or whatever, does it offset that? Maybe. It's the same argument. Okay? Do we see where we're going here? Now, we can also argue that people who need a replacement dose TRT quality of life absolutely improves. That is well documented and demonstrated in the studies. Their all-risk mortality goes down, actually, versus having clinically low testosterone. That's a given. But we're talking about non-TRT use, people who are using, 200 plus milligrams a week, who may not even have clinically low levels. Okay, that's not TRT. So the question becomes, in the grand scheme of things, is it that bad? The data doesn't support that it is. Is it not to say that certain other things like orals and other stuff aren't more problematic? Right. It can be. But we're talking about testosterone and then other milder potential anabolics. So again, we're just looking at what the literature says, and that is what the overall evidence seems to indicate. And anyone who looked at all that evidence would look at it and objectively say, look at everything that we have, plus the anecdote, and say, yeah, there's some minor health negatives to people who do those things in moderation. They're there, but they're relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. The people who are really having the problems are the polydrug abuse situation. People who are abusing extremely high doses of multiple PEDs and ancillaries concurrently, and possibly polydrug abuse from recreational drugs, alcohol, and other stuff in the mix on top of it. That's where we're seeing these early, very predictable deaths. Okay, and we do have to determine that there's a difference. In other words, there's a difference between a moderate drinker who drinks every Friday night and has 2 or 3 drinks versus someone who is drunk every single day and uses heroin. Okay, there's a difference. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.